So, hello again. Um, um, so another day, another put down, huh? Anyway, c'est la vie. Um, so let's talk about that one. Let's look at all the different ways that we've all been put down, and we've put each other down. Okay, and why the great disruption is occurring is going to continue to occur. Okay. Someone said that they reckon Musk's and Trump's contracts are to be disruptors. What are we carrying from us as spirit guides? Yes and no. First of all, there's no contracts. Second of all, they're under the influence of dark wizardry, and they've also done dark wizardry, so it's a two-way street. Third of all, they've been programmed to become disruptors, although they technically had those tendencies to start off with. So just put that aside for a second. Technically, you're looking at the disruptor right now. You just not realising why. Or the hand of disruption, the hand of chaos mathematics, but not chaos magic, that has come to you in many forms. Not many forms, but with many spirits, each doing their own part of the story. So one of these the themes that's come up fairly consistently throughout is this idea of put downs. Okay, so all the different ways that everyone's been put down, there's some very clear themes in the political sphere of how people have been put down, in the discussion of labour versus capital and stratification within labour or the proletariat, to lead to layers of put down. So you're not just put down because you're poor or you're rich. You're put down because you're white or you're black or whatever it might be. And on the discussion of that, is it appropriate to monkey fling shit back at capital because they've been flinging shit at Labor? The answer is yes, up to a point. It's probably more accurate to fling the shit back at the one that flung it at you, but with a little bit attached that teaches them to maybe not do it again. So that could be more effective. Okay. Maybe that's one way of looking at it. There was a very this is something that needs to be discussed. There was a video from a black lady in the USA. We won't name her. Who was in the throes of seeing what Trump and Musk were up to a couple of months ago. And her comment is that she wants segregation to come back just so she can get away from white people because she's sick of having to educate the oppressor. Okay? Okay. That is a disturbing comment. Okay? Considering she's allowed to have her opinions, just putting it out there. What black people in USA went through to get away from segregation and to have the basic dignity of walking down the same street as a white person was extraordinary. The idea that segregation is better is a sign of that person feeling very hurt and disparaged by what the sentiments that were going on in her society. Was she one of the victims of the SMS scandal that happened in the USA at the start of the year, where people got an SMS to say that they were going to be sent back to the plantation? I mean, if you were a black person in the USA and you received that, you might be terrified. That is a horrible put down. considering the history of that country. So has someone like that been put down too much? Have they encountered too many racists, too many sexes to the point where they were so loud it started to drown out the voices of all the people that care? Um, that's sad. Um, don't think that segregation is the answer. Um, People have the right to their own independence and sovereignty and whatever else. Segregation, not so much. Um, Having a society that's divided on racial lines like that, and saying that certain people are allowed to go to the shops and certain people are not, is toxic. It's genuinely fucking toxic. And gotta, someone's at the point where they're upset enough to make an argument like that when they're a black person. It's concerning. What they've been put through emotionally, politically, ideologically. Wow. That was horrifying to witness. That she even considered that for a moment, that it could even pass through her lips. That's a deep hurt to say that. And yeah, that's a deep hurt, and is it the case that there seems to be a thing where it gets too much. So let's have a look at a a stereotype that might help, or might not, just for one moment, which is the cranky old biddy stereotype. So the cranky old biddy is a woman middle age or older, usually older, who's railing against men and worried about the younger women being taken advantage of, and they're all just a bunch of game players and they don't know what they're talking about, and they've got so many toxic attitudes. And yes, the older men are like that even more, but some of the younger men learn it from them, so we're going to be continuously in bloody trouble, and they just constantly have to fight it off, and they get to the point where they no longer want to educate the oppressor, and they become, crazy old cat lady, who just wanders around as a spinster and doesn't have anything to do with them. Just doesn't want to talk to them anymore. They get so sick of it, they voluntarily segregate from the male gender. They forbe their own life because they're that bloody hurt. And the way some of those people have been spoken about suggests that they're witches, or that they would put Hansel and Gretel in an oven, or they're just unhappy because they're barren and they didn't get to have children, or something like that, or they got a bit of the old sausage, then they might calm down. And those sort of commentary just makes them forbe even more. And because it's not acknowledging their hurt, it's not acknowledging their suffering, it's not acknowledging that even though they're not trying to hold grudges usually, it just keeps happening over and over again. And then they start seeing other people going through it and they just go, how come this just keeps happening over and over again? And just how many different ways has this idea that's been described as the patriarchy, right? Okay, whatever it is, just found its way to make excuse after excuse for different types of discrimination against women in particular. And they get done wanting to educate the oppressor, and they segregate and become crazy old cat ladies, spinsters. And they never put Hansel and Gretel in the oven. They just get sick of it. They get sick of abusive boyfriends. They get sick of abusive husbands. They get sick of their ass being grabbed at work, being paid less than men. They get sick of comments and stuff like that, whether they're chaperoned or not. They're getting given shit. They could have great fathers. They could have a great male friend, be a fag hag. They could. It's not to say that all the men in their life have been toxic or narcissistic or evil or whatever it might be. Okay? But they just get sick of it. Absolutely sick and tired of it. And gets to a point where there's just one too many comment about who they're going to reach, or whether or not they feel better if they got a facial or what a nice dress, before they're just saying, shut your fucking mouth. If you do that again, I'm gonna hit you over the head with that frying pan. They get sick of it. And every time a bloke does that, when it's a bloke doing that, he thinks, but it's not that other time. He's not responsible. It's like, well, actually, you did that thing. If you have day after day, and sometimes it's the same oppressor over and over again, right, which is where it gets really frustrating, because if it's one person making a comment once, you might go, or one weird look or whatever it might be, you go, let it go. And there's so many times you can let it go and walk away before you can't walk away anymore. Before it catches up with you, before you cease to exist, before they're there giving you nothing but shit. Giving other people shit. Because their religions told them to, because their cults told them to, because the great mathematics of reality is about hating women. There's no religion that's for women. There's no religion that's by women. Religion isn't for women or by women. Religion is for men and by men. And not all men. It's for capital. Okay? It's for the kings. It's for the aristocracy. It's for whoever the ruling class in that society is. Whoever the boss in that society is, they've decided that that's what the law is and everyone must follow it. That's how reality works. That's the cult fictions that they have to operate by, or else. And so, when you get these overseas cults that are forcing their way into your life, because that's normal for their culture and that's normal for their society, that's just another example of misogyny and hatred. That's disrespect of country. It's not okay. And so these people, right, that do that are just part of a general tendency called condescension. It's disappointing to see the amount of condescension that is apparent in psychology as well. As a psych graduate, this body is prone to having that as part of worldview, as part of the tools and of knowledge, to attempt to articulate ideas, however in a flawed fashion, to explain something or resolve something or whatever it might be. The thing is that particular thing about non-belief. Let's talk is important. Okay, well, why is there something disappointing about psychology and how it relates to non-belief and how that relates back to religion? Well, I'll put it another way. The word patriarchy is not from psychology; it's from sociology. To start off with, it's a political term. It's a variation on a word associated with feminism to try and articulate the idea a little bit better. So it's a derived word. The other thing as well is the idea of non-belief. So one of the assumptions that is a faulty assumption, and a non-scientific one as it turns out, is the idea of belief being associated with experience. So in Hermeticism, based on some of the comments that have been observed by people who are claiming to be Hermeticists on YouTube, it sounds like they're articulating the idea that what you experience is caused by what you believe, which isn't true. What you believe is caused by how you interpret what you experience, is actually the truth. What you experience is not caused by belief at all. You can have no beliefs in the ocean or the beach. You can live in a jungle, a remote jungle in the Amazon. You could be one of those dart spitters. You know, those people that throw darts that live in the Amazon rainforest. Those people might have no belief in the ocean at all. It's completely divorced from everything that they experience. They might not even have a word for it in their language. Okay, what language is. Okay, but the ocean nonetheless exists. And should one of those people be transported from the Amazon rainforest to the ocean, they would be amazed at such a magnificent and enormous thing that they did not know existed. Their beliefs would alter in accordance with that experience. Their belief didn't cause that experience. They might not have believed anyone would come and transport them either. It might have been a surprise. It might have been, I'm not even saying there's anything untoward about it. It might have been an unexpected journey. They might have got lost through the jungle one day and just kept wandering and wandering and wandering until they got to the ocean. Either way, they weren't expecting it. They didn't believe it. And yet, there it was. And so it is with a lot of experiences that people have. They don't expect their experiences. They don't believe that those things exist until they encounter them. And so, people's beliefs have very little bearing on the generation of experiences, except that as part of worldview, it might have an attitude thing that contributes to behaviour somehow. Okay, so if you're of the attitude of beliefs doesn't contribute to experiences, it isn't a cause for verbal experiences, then you might adopt the attitude of telling someone that, which is a behaviour. Case in point. So there are obviously many other examples of that. If someone believes in Jesus Christ and that they have to proselytise the faith, otherwise the devil's going to get people, then you might get Bible bashed. But a whole bunch of other people don't believe that. So when it comes to things like, if you don't want the devil to exist, stop believing it, that's great. It works for the atheist just fine. What it doesn't work for is the projectile vomit that comes from religions. The sense that they're trying to force people to adopt positions that they simply do not have. Positions that are distractions from resolving whatever situation they're actually truly in. Dogma and belief is an impediment to wisdom. It's an impediment to truth, and it's an impediment to solving issues. And it doesn't matter which cult you're coming from at that point. Most people would assume Christianity because the devil was mentioned earlier. But the same is true of the New Age movement, Judaism, Islam, etc., etc., etc. It's as true on the left wing as it is on the right wing. It's as true as it of totalitarians as it is in anarchists. That everyone has a belief, attitude, or something that was generated by one of their experiences, okay, or interpretations of their experiences that led to some kind of outcome where the idea was overgeneralized. It was put out of context. And because it was out of context, it made it difficult for people to solve what the actual context was or is. And so, in that respect, what you call the scientific method becomes your best friend. Okay? Observe and report. Only have honest intentions. That's it. Observe and report, only have honest intentions. That's it. Don't assume to know everything. Be in a state of Cartesian doubt. Okay? That's absolutely justifiable. That's a completely justifiable position. When you get to scientism, which is your pulpit scientists, okay, who are propagating stuff which, quite frankly, sounds like it's not scientifically valid, but more postulates, then and scientifically valid means they've gone into the lab and they've measured it and they found it exists and the hypothesis was more supported than not. Okay, that's roughly what that means. Okay, a scientist getting a cool idea or wherever he got it from, maybe someone else and not referencing them properly, would be an example of someone or using their platform to continue to get attention. And so unless it's backed up with, unless they preface their statements with, this is not a falsified or verified idea, it's just an idea for the time being, then it sounds a bit like scientism for the audience goes, let's appeal to the logical fallacy of appealing to authority. That person is supposed to be part of some institution or whatever. Therefore, what they say goes type of thing, which you shouldn't do. So, you shouldn't do if you're walking the path of truth, quite frankly. So, on the subject of put downs, there is a put down based on obviously the stratification principle associated with capital labour, the patriarchy, things of that sort, and prejudice more generally. But there's also the implicit prejudice and put down that's found in things like assuming because someone, this is something that people who experience domestic violence sometimes go through. They go through this thing where the abuser is hurting them in that moment, but it cannot possibly be that abuser that's at fault. It's got to be some kind of trauma from their past and they're just overreacting. Okay, that kind of behaviour is a means by which the offender is engaging in darvo and deflection, okay, and trying to make assumptions about the person that they're harming that are untrue and unfair. They're basically acting like a monkey flinging shit and trying to say the shit came from somewhere else. They're trying to make someone responsible for things that they're not actually responsible for. Okay? And that kind of behaviour is fairly common amongst certain substrata and is often associated with the alt-right, but is also associated with the alt-left. So there are people who question capital and labour relations, might be aware of things like racial and gendered biases and prejudice, but engage in those as an active Darvo because they were discriminated against by a third party. So they go and make a type 2 generalization error and they hurt someone innocent. Someone who never hurt them, someone who did nothing wrong, someone who doesn't even know what they're talking about, someone who in a different circumstances would have actually defended them from the bully that had hurt them in the first place. And so that type of stratification is a sign of those that have been stratified, those that have been abused, acting as in the role of the abuser and re-stratifying their behaviour. And so if you turn around and you try and abuse the lumpen proletariat or other stratas within the proletariat, then you're doing exactly that. You're giving the empire exactly what they want. You're not engaging in class consciousness at all. You're not engaging in anti-racist or anti-sexist behaviour. Okay, so when the Democrats put down MAGA by failing to acknowledge that those people were in fact abused by propaganda, abused by economic and class warfare on their communities in the decades that preceded the founding of the Trumpian cult, that they were engaging in a form of stratification also and acting in the role of the abuser. The people they're frustrated. They're frustrated, okay, because the maggots supported him, right? But technically, actually, the more they investigate, the more they realise Starlink this and Pennsylvania that, and next thing well, actually, maybe they didn't vote for him at all. And so that's a different type of victim blaming. Like Trump went around and ripped those people off anyway. That's double victim blaming. So if the Democrats want to win those people's support, they might want to change their rhetoric a little bit. The other thing too with stratification is the internalization of language that props up the oppressor. So when you say things like the president is the most powerful person in the world, okay, you're appeasing the oppressor. When you say things like Elon Musk is the richest person in the world, you're appeasing the oppressor. Not only is that not true because there's recently been revealed to be a Saudi oil trillionaire, but you're still technically appeasing the oppressor. Okay. What you define as wealth when you are from proletariat or lumpen proletariat classes or substratas is going to be drastically different from what capital is accustomed to valuing. They ask, what are they worth by terms of how much money they've got, and they put you down by saying they're worth more than you. That's part of the propaganda they put out through the media that they typically own and buy. So people are being put down by stuff like that through language, subtle and overt, and it's hurting their feelings. It's hurting their feelings. It's also hurting the feelings of men. So when we talk about patriarchy and we talk about the gendered warfare that women have been experiencing, that is also a means by which women have experienced as a consequence of men doing warfare on each other. So in that stratification situation, a man is struggling to get one up on the blokes that are harming him, so he goes after a Sheila. Okay? And so that sort of warfare between men, okay, has contributed to the warfare on women. Okay? And this is where feminism tries to talk about, or feminist theory tries to talk about gender roles as it relates to that, because the men's traditional gender role as the warrior, protector and provider means that he feels somewhat emasculated if he's not top dog, if he's not getting one up on all the bullies. He has to see all the world as being full of bullies and he has to fight them all off or something like that. Rah! Big he-man, right? Okay? But that's not who he is. He might be diplomatic. He might be artistic. He might be nurturing. He might be an avid communicator. It could be a great big fucking softie, quite frankly. He might be sick of warfare. He might think that the best way to fight in that battle is to stay out of it and just apply support to the community and teach them how to stay away from that. Just stay out of that drama. Do something else. and just, not take aboard that attitude. So there's lots of different strategies that people have employed. It's not a binary, is it? And so the sort of the idea the idea is that the men are put down, you stupid little fucking tard. You're not man the fuck up, right? Okay, that puts men down. That puts men down with their children, and they become wounded adults who abuse others. Sometimes those men choose not to abuse others because they thought that was nasty and had to think about it. Sometimes men abuse others when they weren't treated like that and were mollycoddled. So it's not a one-to-one relationship anyway. Nonetheless, it doesn't help. They're still wounded, and so that wound needs to be acknowledged. So when the great wounds called the Royal Commission happened in Australia, and it predominantly affected male survivors of clergy abuse, although it wasn't exclusively about that, to have that wound acknowledged in the men of Australia was a fucking great thing. There was nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, there's not those men who encountered that particular vile form of abuse, okay, obviously are not less of men. Even if those men turn out to be homosexual, they're still not less of men. Okay, they're every bit as a match of men as they were the day before. It doesn't say anything about them whatsoever. It says everything about the abuser and nothing about them. Okay, and so some of the victim blaming language we need to talk about. And this is where some ideas that were briefly reflected on a Wikipedia article about Kybalion, okay, which is the idea of soul contracting, why that is a toxic idea. Other than the fact that the idea of someone coming to some sort of agreement with something that seems to be an abstract notion based on culture before they even come to exist sounds ludicrous. It also seems toxic in the sense that they're basically saying that people who are born into war zones or into tragedies of any kind, especially ones that involve children, or it's like, oh, it's okay because they agreed to that before they were born. And it's like, well, no, they didn't do that. There's nothing about that situation that implies consent. If you're talking about people who are underage, or people who don't yet exist, or people who no longer exist, such as a dead person, for example, then you can't imply that consent is even possible. And consent is required for contracts. So so they're bullshitting people. That's victim blaming language, okay? You're not gonna tell the people of Cambodia that were alive during the period of Pol Pot that they decided to be born in Cambodia just so they could experience armed henchmen going around villages and murdering 1/3 of the people there, and then having to flee in boats to foreign countries, scared for their lives. That they wanted to see that when they were 2 years old or in kindergarten or something horrendous like that. No, you are not going to put that shit on them, Kybalion. Like, you absolutely are not. And that is a disrespectful attitude towards those people or to anyone who has experienced something that, yes, is against their consent. Their beliefs did not create that. They did not consent to that. That was a bully who did harm on them and they didn't consent to it. And in some cases, their communities did in fact resist. In fact, many, if not all cases, they resisted. And in some cases, that resistance was motive for the Pol Pot characters of the world to cause even further harm to them. So you need to start by asking a question, is if someone stands up to a bully, okay, why in some cases is that motive for the bully to engage in worse bullying than before? As opposed to that bullying seeing that they have the right, they have a responsibility to be stood up to, that the person being bullied has the right to stand up to them. It doesn't matter which one it is. Okay, you can't turn around and say that resistance is a bad idea and you must have received wisdom all the time. In the context of, say, the French during World War II, disobeying the laws that were being imposed upon them to have people taken out of the area to safety, you just can't fucking do that. Rebellion has its place in society. Rebellion is an essential part of freedom. Rebellion is an essential part of overcoming bullying. And you'll probably find that the biggest bully of all is the one that tells you that you can't rebel. And sorry, everyone, but that's God.